Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is getting started on change. Think it takes a plan, strategy, SWOT analysis, and a 3-day meeting to figure out how to do an implementation inside your organization? Listen to Brad Herman and Hai Nguyen from Call 'em All lead a discussion around how Call 'em All gets past paralysis and analysis and goes from idea to action by having a strategy that can be best summed up by Mikey: just do it. Okay, here we go.
We're going to do this today to give you a little background. I'm kind of the talker of the pair of us. Hai and I founded Call 'em All 11 years ago, and he will do his usual role, which is to add insight, try to clean up the messes I make, and ask good questions. That's kind of how we seem to work.
Hi, everyone.
So, hello, hi. We're not in the same office today, though, so we're going to do this apart, but it should be just fine. So today, what we wanted to do is talk a little bit about one of the questions we get when people come by our office, and we've heard it at other offices as well. And some of you might be either struggling with this or have seen this as well yourselves. And that is the challenge of, boy, how do I get here? Where would I start? I couldn't do this at my office because of yada, yada, yada. And it pains me to hear that, because I don't think that building a great culture is dependent upon having everybody in one office or is dependent upon some certain condition. I think that anybody can do it. And but where would you get started? How would you do it? And that is a very fair question that I think people are asking. And so that's what we want to try to address today. And a couple of ground rules here. Number one, Hai and I are very well aware we do not have all the answers. We just sat down and brainstormed and kind of came up with some of these talking points on our own. And we also would love to have you all jump in with questions, examples, ideas, you name it. So we need and want this to be interactive today, and kind of to have us just be the facilitators. And we have an outline and we'll go through that, but please jump in. We don't have the answers and we don't have the best examples every time. So we want to hear from you guys. Okay. All right. So, when we get started, we talk about a culture change or a change in your organization. We've got sort of a few areas we think that it would be wise to stop and think about. And the first one is, why are you doing this? What are your goals for this? What is it you're hoping to accomplish through these changes? Is it, changing an entire team's outlook and culture and attitude? Is it a specific project that you're working on? You don't necessarily have to be running a company to institute culture change. You could do that on a team or a project as well. Really, what does success look like? And so I think it's good to kind of take inventory of what you're trying to do. The second thing is, great, where what your goals are, but where are you now? And I think this is an important one to understand from a few different aspects. Is this a new team? Is it a new project? Is it something that's existing? Has it been there for a long time with a lot of maybe it's stagnant and it's been sitting there for a while, and you're going to try to completely, get a rock not moving to start moving downhill. But then, how is the culture of the team? Is it healthy? Do you have folks amongst the team that are open to change and ideas like this, or might you encounter resistance? I think you really need to stop and take a look at the people that will be involved in this, because for one person by any means. And then we like this one. Where are you from a leadership standpoint? We'll talk about this a little bit later in my own story where I was. But have you done this before? With my team, for example, I joke that every time we add a new person to Call 'em All, I am it's the biggest company I've ever managed. So I'm in new territory every single time. Do you have the background, the skills? Do you need to sharpen them up, et cetera? And we'll talk about that a little bit. Once you know where you're going and you kind of have a good inventory of where you are and how receptive your group may be, or where you may have challenges, The third aspect to sort of getting ready that you should talk about is, do you really care enough to make it happen? And that might sound like a funny question, but if you're on a team and the CEO of the company says, we've got some bad Glassdoor reviews, we need to improve our culture to get rid of those bad reviews, that person maybe doesn't care enough to institute culture change in their organization, because it's not the kind of thing that's a quick fix. I think it's a lot of, to do it right. We'll walk through. There's a lot of background work and effort. And once you have a good culture, you've got to defend it constantly and make tough decisions. It's not all it's not all free snacks and ping pong. There's a lot of tough decisions that you kind of have to make, and you'll find that you have to defend your culture frequently, I believe. Let's take a look at your team. And, do they care enough? Are you able to get the team that you're implementing it with, or the team that's above you or supporting you? Are they on board with this? Can you, do they nod their heads and smile and think it's a great idea, to change the culture of whatever it is that you do, your project, your company? Or might you have some resistance? Because this is a point under, do you care enough to do this? Because you might have to make some tough decisions, and you might have people that frankly are not on board and will actually actively resist your changes to culture. Do you care enough to possibly remove those people, hire somebody new, train them, bring them up to speed on the regular job, and try to institute culture change? So I do believe it's a fair question to ask if you care enough to make it happen. Are you willing to put in that kind of work? Because the culture job never really ends. It's not a project that you do for 6 months and then you check it off the list and you go on to the next thing. And we'll talk about this a little bit and why that is as we walk through here.
Yeah, I would add one thing, about this being a journey. Brad and I are giving this talk today, but I mean, we're still learning every day, just like you guys. And I remember at the last summit going to New Belgium Brewery and remember turning to Brad and saying, man, these guys are awesome. We still got such a long ways to go with our company, and so much to learn from everybody else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Does anybody have any particular challenges or situations that they want to share with us? You've got an idea, you want to change the culture somewhere, anything that's hot topic on your mind that you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, and just a reminder, you can unmute yourself in the participant panel, or you can chat us in some questions and we'll moderate for you. But Brad and Hyde are interactive.
Great. Okay, so let me walk through here. And I think this next section is actually where people might have other ideas and suggestions too. So you've taken inventory of where you are, you know where your team is, you've determined, no, I really care about this and I'm ready to do this the right way and go for the long term. So how do we move forward? What do we do? And I think the answer, again, comes back to you, that you're the person that is going to be the leader of this change in your organization. And we've got a list of things to check yourself before you really go out and bring this to your team or your company. I'll kind of tell you how this happened for Hai and I. We were, I don't know, Hai, 5 years into Call 'em All. We had a business that was now probably it was able to stand on its own 2 feet, and we did. Hai gave me feedback from him and the team. It really may be all from Hai, and he just said it was from the team.
Disguised.
Hai gave me feedback, and what the team says, hey, we want you to really focus on vision and where we're going, and less on day-to-day operations. And it was really cool for me because it kind of took there were some things that I wanted to do, and I didn't necessarily have the confidence to just go off and do them, but it was wonderful to hear the team encourage me to do that. And I ended up going to several leadership conferences that year. I stumbled upon Small Giants, which was one of the best things that's ever happened to us and me personally. And started, getting out there. I started discovering books that I wanted to read and changing my mindset to one away from operations and more into leadership, and beginning to try and develop myself and I'd argue high as well as leaders. And some of the things we started doing was reading up on leadership. It's really basic. I'd call it servant leadership, is sort of our style of culture-based leadership. I scribbled down a few books that we read that had an impact on us, and I'll just kind of read that list off. But if anybody else has any books they want to jump in and recommend, we really enjoyed 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Pat Lencioni, and that is actually today, including Small Giants, it is the only book that we require and ask all of our new hires to read. That's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. There's an old one called The 1 Minute Manager that I really think speaks to our style of healthy culture and giving people, feedback that you care promptly. A big one that shaped a lot of our policies is called Drive by Daniel Pink. And that's all about what motivates people. And you'll find out that autonomy, and I think these are things that all go into a healthy culture. People want to have freedom over, what they're working on and how they're doing it. And that kind of is mimicked in what you hear about healthy cultures, is that people have, they're empowered and they have the freedom to make a difference. Obviously, Small Giants, Bo Burlingham has to be mentioned. I enjoyed reading Conscious Capitalism. I found it inspiring to me. And then Paul Spiegelman wrote a book called Why Is Everyone Smiling? And for those of you that don't know, Paul founded the Small Giants community. So I enjoyed that as well. So getting out and going to conferences, reading books. One of the other things is, looking for leadership organizations. And I think one of the things that I'd like to mention here is I've found that they're not all the same. I've been in other organizations where the people in the organization aren't necessarily all solving problems from the same aspect in terms of healthy cultures. They may be, just because they're leaders doesn't mean they approach leadership the same way that you do. If you're trying to instill a healthy culture, I would recommend looking for organizations that include other leaders that are trying to do the same thing. Small Giants obviously is one of my favorites, but there's certainly others out there. This is a favorite of mine, and that's visiting model companies in either your area or in your industry. And, if there's a company that you look up to, who you respect what they're doing, and maybe you model yourself after, they may be in the same industry, just in another city, and they're happy to share. And I've found that, I see you nodding your head, people that really care about building a great culture seem to be really open and willing to share. So it can't hurt to ask to follow models. And I know I haven't ever heard of people being turned down for that kind of stuff. So that's a healthy one. And again, this is all ideas that are working on you before we even talk about changing the culture in your team. And, Hi and I think you've got to have a support structure so that you can continuously learn and get better on this stuff. Next one we have is, there's certainly blogs, books, and I think this is a big thing. As you start doing these, if you start going to leadership organizations, you start surrounding yourself with mentors and example companies. What we think will happen, and what we think is very important, is that you shift your attention and your focus, maybe your mindfulness, towards healthy culture. And when you involve and engage with those things, it sort of continues this virtuous cycle and getting your mind where that's what you're paying attention to. Because when you're mindful about a problem, you're really paying attention to it, we feel you become consciously competent towards culture. Meaning that you're not just good at it and you're not even aware of it, but you're a step back. You become good at it because you are aware and that you know what you're doing and you're mindful about it. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm kind of talking in circles here, but
yeah. Yeah, when Calma first started, I think both Brad and I felt that we had a pretty good culture, but I think the problem is we probably didn't know why, and it wasn't until we went to Zingerman's as a company and went through their visioning exercises, and one of the things that Ari kind of talked about was this level, it's stages of competence, and you start out at the bottom of being unconsciously unconsciously incompetent, right?
Yeah, you're terrible at it, and you don't even know that you're terrible at it.
You're terrible at it, you don't even know. And then the next stage of competence is you become consciously incompetent, meaning you learn a little bit and you start to realize how much you don't know. And then after that, you become consciously competent, meaning you're able to do these, you're competent at doing these things, but it takes a lot of effort and you have to think through everything. And then eventually you become unconsciously competent. And he said the trick is to really bring it down a level to being consciously competent, so that you're being more deliberate and you can understand why things are working and why things aren't working.
Yeah, and that's it. And so culture is something that Hai and I talked about, that we don't ever want to become unconsciously competent at culture, because we feel it is, and I see somebody chatting here, the ultimate advantage. We feel that culture is our ultimate competitive advantage. And if we either fall, I don't think we'd fall back to incompetent at it, but we want to be very deliberate and mindful about culture all the time and not take it for granted, so that we don't slide up into unconsciously competent.
I think Jim has a question here.
How much of the culture is being driven between Hai and Brad versus incorporating other people to drive this? How many people are you sending to Zingerman's and other places like this, or and other conferences and such, or is it really being driven by you two?
You want to take it, Hai?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that we're going to hit on this later on in the talk as well. But I think we feel that it's really important to involve everybody in this, especially in the visioning and the values, getting input about the culture. It's important to involve everybody, not just so that, in my opinion, just so that you can get buy-in for it, but I think that people will own it and defend it if they feel like they really had a part in shaping it. And so the culture is going to be there, is going to be functioning and healthy, whether or not leadership is there or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's foolish to think that if a leader disappears, or, I go walk out and get hit by a bus, it's not going to affect the culture. But our goal is certainly, Jim, to create something that's bigger than us. And let's go right into it, because that's our next section here is, now that you've worked on yourself and you've given yourself a support structure, let's talk about involving the team. And Hai and I, as Hai mentioned at Zingerman's, we've become converts. We're really big on visioning, and setting a vision for where you want to go. And I think that, we did this yesterday, or actually on Monday, with my brother's company. We all sat in a room and talked about, they're not as well established as we are. They're not profitable yet. And we said, where do we need to go, and what do we want to look like a year from now, everybody? And what does success look like for us a year from now? And it's not just a strategic thing about your product. It's something bigger about what your team looks like and how your team is functioning and what you really care about and what you prioritize. And I think it's okay to sit down and say, I don't have all the answers and I don't know. What do we want to be? And I think that, one of the warnings that I saw somewhere was, when you do that, let's be careful that you don't want to be something that is a little bit too aspirational, right? Like, it needs to be realistic and attainable, and but also inspiring. But that's it. And I think you just talk about it, and then what we came up with, and I'll use Monday as an example, we came up with was sort of, these are the points that we feel are most important. And And we kind of just wrote them out, and it essentially outlined writing a vision for us. And in that case, on Monday, we were writing a vision for 1 year out. What does it look like on 1 year out? How do we feel? And I think when you talk, instead of just about products and services and revenues, I think you kind of miss the point of the vision. A lot of it is emotional and how you feel, and that's how you have your vision become inspiring. But when you do that, and I guess I'll give another example about our manifesto, and this goes straight to your question, Jim. We had two women come in and facilitate. What is it about Call 'em All that you like and you love and that inspires you? And they kicked Hi and I out of the room. So, to the extent that we were documenting our culture, Hi and I were actually not in the room at one of the most pivotal points in our company's history. And they started off with a simple question, and it was just, what does Call 'em All mean to you, and what do you like about it, and what do you want it to be in the future? And folks started writing out these statements and telling stories, and they're really just whiteboarding it all out. And we stumbled into, one of the women that was there said, "You know what this is? This is like your manifesto." And everybody got really excited about it. Hi and I got brought in. They're like, "We think we have a manifesto." And we're like, "What? Huh?" Okay, cool. Like, what is it? Show it to us. And do we get to have input too? And we all kind of voted on what statements, resonated with us the most. And they had really very little or nothing to do with our product. It was just about what motivated the people. So I think we kind of went through two examples here. One was with my brother's company, where they're kind of setting out a vision for a year for their company, and that it included sort of products and things that got them excited. But on the other end, we had Call 'em All, and ours was almost entirely emotional, who we are as people, and didn't even talk about our product at all. But in both cases, we see the team get really excited and energized because they all participated in it and came up with it together.
There are four important things you should strive for when writing a vision. The first is that the vision has to be inspiring. So it's helpful to write it write it in present tense, but from the future, like you're looking back at the year. It should be strategically sound, like Brad said. It has to be attainable, realistic. And then I think the next two is important too. You have to, after you finish with it, make sure that you document the vision, write it down somewhere. And the last is to communicate it with everybody, and so that everybody knows what the vision is, and also helpful to revisit it too, every quarter or every 6 months or whatever it is.
Yeah. So when we wrote our Call 'em All's 10-year vision, we kind of all agreed on the points. The whole team was involved, and we did a different exercise where we kind of write it all out on those giant easel boards, whatever, and people went around and sort of voted on what inspires them the most and what they're most passionate about, etc. And we bundled all those up and took the biggest points that we wanted to include and assigned little teams to do that. And it's just a draft. You just start writing what it looks like. Of course, our manifesto didn't have a whole vision. That was just our sort of our values and who we are. But you just have some folks write it out. And we found that we had an engineer who's particularly, he can make people cry when he writes stuff, which is pretty crazy. People had some hidden talents, but everybody you can have a team of 2 or 3 that is writing this out and documenting it for everybody, but the entire team participated in it. And what happens is then when you put it in a story format, it really becomes quite a powerful tool for everyone to agree on, this is where we're going and this is what we're working towards. And we found it works well. And then, I think we talk about implementing it high. You talked about sharing it with everybody. And I'll kind of walk through some of the ways that we do that.
Jim had another question here.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to
No, please interrupt.
Yep.
So my question here is, you talk about a manifesto and then you talk about a vision. Are those two things separate documents? Are they one and the same? Tell me about, you talk about this manifesto several times today, so I don't know what that is. Could you help to explain what that is?
Sure. So our manifesto, I wouldn't say it's our values. Essentially, our values statement. It's our North Star, if you will. And that came about by, just getting together and saying, who are we and what do we like about Call 'em All? And it's on our website. I think it's callemall.com /manifesto. If you want to take
what we believe, basically.
Yeah.
It's a fun way to boil down what we believe.
Yeah, it really describes who we are as a company. And then the vision is something separate, Jim, and complementary. The vision, obviously, everything in the vision would need to jive with our manifesto. But I think it's a great question, because where are we going with this? Hey, you can kind of come up with either one. If your team is new or your team doesn't have a set of values that you believe in, well, how do you make decisions? How do you hire? How do you do that? I think that's like a starting block for your company is what you believe and what you want to be. And then probably the vision more naturally follows that and says, okay, now that we knew who we are and what we want to be, what do we want to do? What does it look like when we act this way for a period of time? Is that fair? How does it, anybody else want to jump in? Does that sound?
I think that's good.
Okay. So yeah, you've got to, and I think that applies, Jim, even if it was a team, right? Like if I was a few years out of school and I got given a project, it's going to be a big 1-year project for the company, and I have a key role on it. I think it's entirely appropriate to get the group together and say, look, I've got this idea. I want to be the most successful project that our company's ever run. And I want it to be the most successful project because we have the best team, the highest functioning team that this company's ever put together on a project. You guys, does that sound good to you? And then you just kind of write down like, okay, well, what do we have to do to be the highest functioning team? What do we have to, how are we going to work together? And what's it going to look like? And you set aside the actual work that you're doing, and you talk about who you're going to be and how you're going to work together and why you're going to be the highest functioning. I feel like I'm rambling on in a project, but I think that's what I would do. And then I would say, okay, great. Now that we know how we're going to work together, our values as a team, what's the vision for what we're creating with this project? And you go forward that way. Hopefully that makes sense. And then, once we have those things at Call 'em All, we start institutionalizing it. So our manifesto's on the wall, and the great Tom Walter years ago of Tasty Catering was asking me a few questions about Call 'em All, and he's like, yeah, you guys are on the right track. Is it on your wall? And I'm like, what on your wall? And he's like, this manifesto you're telling me about. And I was like, no. And he's like, well, how do you share it with people? How do they, how do you make decisions with it every day? And I was like, well, we all get to spend it. I was like, no, like incorporate it into, is it in your reviews? Do you talk about how well someone is matching up with your manifesto? I'm like, no, sorry. And so we started making it a part of our onboarding now. We make it part of our recruiting. We stick our manifesto. That is now like on the first line of all of our hires. It's, look, this is us and we're passionate about this. So if some of this doesn't line up with you, which is okay, don't apply here because you're not going to be a good fit. Then when you onboard, we start talking about, we have this formula for how we work, but all of our culture documents that we came up with and our vision, those are like up front and center the first week that people are getting on board with us. And so we learned that from some other small giants, and you see it in action. I'll give you an example. Tom at Tasty Catering, theirs is not only on the wall of their conference room. There's 6, I don't know if anybody from Tasty's on here, but there's 6 prime tenants. And they actually read them out at the beginning of every meeting that they have, which I think is really cool. Like, this is so important. We're going to read it to ourselves 3 times a week at our meetings. So there's all kinds of different ways to institutionalize it, but I think that's the important thing, and it's a mistake we almost fell into if we hadn't had the support structure around us, of incorporating it into everything that you do. And that goes for like stories and legends. So if you have an example of somebody making a decision based using the manifesto or your values to make decision A instead of decision B, tell that story and incorporate it. And we actually, in our onboarding, have people, we make them go around to people in the office and say, tell me the story about how we created the vision at Zingerman's. It says in here, you were one of the people that opposed it and thought it was really goofy. Can you tell me about that? And you know, as these stories come up, you find ways to incorporate them and get the people that come into your organization to learn from them and understand how important they are to you. And hopefully, if you do that, you get this momentum behind it all, where now it's like this self-moving, you know, it's this, it's just part of what you do. And so people don't get left out of it. Even new people that come in feel like they understand the history of the company and your culture and where it all came from. Nodding your head. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yep.
I'm trying to look. We use it in our reviews. We use it in daily decision making, and I'll highlight one of the things that of what success looks like with your values, your culture, and your vision. Tom Walter said, "Listen, Brad, you'll know you're doing it right when the people on your team call you out on your values." And that happened. One of our longtime engineers, the lines on our manifesto says, we believe in doing the right thing, even when no one's looking. And we were going to do something, and Dan came up to me and he goes, "Hey," right in front of several people, he's like, "Hey, Brad, is that really doing the right thing when no one's looking?" And I had to be like, okay, time out. First, I'm so happy that you said that and you said it in front of everybody and you called me out on it. But second, I do think it's good, and we had a healthy debate about it, you know. But it was a good sign. I thought of Tom when you know, one of our employees called me out and felt totally comfortable calling me out on the manifesto. So I think as you see those things, you'll start knowing that you're doing it right. Okay, I'm walking through here. Hi, you got anything you want to jump in with?
No, you're doing great.
Okay. So now what we try to do is we try to make sure that we protect our culture. And I think a few things happen. In the beginning, it's a lot more work. Without a doubt, it's more work in the beginning. And like I mentioned, when we took the whole company to Zingerman's, we had that same engineer that called me out on the manifesto admitted afterwards, he's like, "I thought this was kind of dumb, you know, coming up to a deli to write a vision, you know, write stories from the future." So you will have people like that. And I think that it's important to understand, going way back to the beginning when we said, what does your team look like? Are you going to have resistance to these kind of changes or not? I think it's important to discuss the difference between a person who's on board and okay with things, even though they might not be gung-ho, you know, right, carrying the flag, you know, through the bullets. But there's a difference between engaged, I don't know what you call the middle section, and people who are actively disengaged. And so we had some people when we went to Zingerman's who were like, "This is okay. Like, I'm not so sure about this thing, but I'm not going to sit here and torpedo it." It's the ones that torpedo you that I think you need to look out for and make sure that those get removed off your team. And we've had to do that. We are willing to take someone who's doing a fantastic job at the actual work part of their job, but who's affecting our culture in a negative way. And you have to defend that. So I think you kind of take a look at your team as you start doing these things and say, is anybody actively disengaged and just not going along? Or others? We have other employees that come in and say, "Hey, you know, this culture stuff, it's great. Like, I'm happy to be a part of it. You know, I'm glad y'all are doing it, whether it makes that big of a deal to me or not. I'm okay with it." And then we have others who are, who are torch bearers and standard bearers. Does that make sense? And even at Zingerman's, Ari Weinsweig, the percentage of his employees that were surveyed as being like all in, all about this wonderful culture that they've created was really surprisingly low. And I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was around a third of their employees were all about the culture, and the vast majority of them are like appreciate it and cool about it, and it works well.
Yeah, I remember when we went to when we took the company to Zingerman's that one year, and looking back, I really think the Zingerman's trip was it was a watershed moment in our company's history, and I remember, like, even for me, I didn't have high expectations of it either. And I remember we flew up there on like a Friday or something like that. And we spent Friday, Saturday, Sunday just hanging out with each other, having fun, basically team building. And I remember Sunday night turning to Brad and saying, hey, if the trip ended right here, I think it would have been a huge success just based on the camaraderie that we had over the weekend. But then when Monday came along and we went through these 2 days of visioning as a company, it just kind of really blew me away, and it really was a watershed moment in our history.
Yeah. And back to Jim's original question, we did take, I think there were 13 of us at the time, and we took the whole company from Texas to Michigan. But I don't think you don't have to do that. With my brother's company, they don't have the budget that we have. But when we sit down and involve the entire team with who do we want to be? What are our values? And what do we want to look like 12 months from now? There's this huge boost in energy and excitement and enthusiasm from the team. Even the folks who are kind of like, okay, they're kind of quiet in the meeting, whatever. They get a little pep in their step from everybody else around them having such great energy. So,
got a follow up just to that real quick, Brad. I'm sorry, I keep heading into this thing. But how much of because you brought up how much of your budget or how much resources do you devote to culture building? How much time is it an hour long week? Is it just something you just kind of, and especially in the beginning, not necessarily today. Maybe you only do something quickly before each meeting today, but you flew up 13 people, so that was a significant budget. But you go to conferences, you go to leadership. How much actually company resource do you spend, maybe as a percentage or a natural?
Whew. That's a good question, and I'm just going to tell you, I don't know. Frankly, we, when you look at something, I'm trying to think of it in terms of percentages. I don't know, Jim. We flew everybody up there, and that was a pretty significant expense, and we take the entire company somewhere. And we think they're always very impactful for us. But there's so many little things like, these books. I saw other people talking about the books they read. It can be reading. I think a lot of it is just mindfulness, and that doesn't cost anything, right? And putting your time and attention. On one hand, it doesn't cost anything dollars wise. On the other hand, it's everything about you, right? Like, where are you putting your time and attention? And so some of it, I think, is as simple as giving it attention in our weekly meetings and talking about how important our culture is and how we have to defend it.
Yeah, that's part of the resources that I was speaking of. I'm sorry. Resources doesn't necessarily have to be dollars, but do you spend an hour a week on this? Do you spend 10 minutes a week on this at this point in time? Is this something that? How much part of mine?
Let me answer the question in another way. I think the Zingerman's trip came about not from a planning, something that we planned for, like, hey, we need to spend X amount of resources on this or that. I think what happened was it happened quite organically. You know, when Brad mentioned at the beginning, you know, we gave him feedback that he should be thinking more strategically. And in going to these leadership events and meeting Ari and going to the Small Giants Passport, he got so much value out of that it just became a decision of, hey, should we take the whole company and do this and go to the Zing train and be part and do this 2-day training. And I think it was just that it wasn't that we felt like we needed to spend X amount of time on it per year or per week or whatever it is. I think we just felt like there was a big hole in our organization in terms of culture, and going to the Zing train might be a big benefit to the company.
Yeah, I've got 2 other examples I can jump in with that have different levels. I mean, the Zingerman thing is such a commitment, time and money. One example is what we call the Call 'em All formula, which is basically a straight ripoff of Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I asked the whole company to read that book, and we just started talking about it, and everybody said, "Yeah, that's how a team should look, and that's how it should go." And I'm like, it sort of happened organically, talking about it. And what we did was we formed a committee. I did not head the committee. Hi, were you on the committee? Okay, I wasn't on the committee. I was just a committee member, and we had about 5 representatives, and one of our junior folks led the committee, and we talked about what does 5 dysfunctions of a team look like at Call 'em All, and what does it sound like at Call 'em All. And because it was a little too consulting-y for us, and we're a very casual company, and that committee, we might have met for an hour or 2, maybe 3 times. And we came up with this thing called the Call 'em All formula, and it's 5 stages with some bullets underneath that these little sayings that we use. One of them on holding people accountable, for example, is I push because I care. And so now you'll hear that expression all the time. Like if you've got to go hold your peer or me accountable, you can kind of up and be like, hey, I'm pushing because I care. And you can point to this formula on the wall that we all came up with, or that this team of 5 came up with and everybody endorsed. And I mean, that thing is now used every day in decision makings. It's used in reviews. And it probably took us, Jim, 6 hours, maybe 5 people times 6 hours, so 30 hours worth of work to come up with. And then everybody had to read the book before that, but it's a really short, easy book to read. And that's how this key thing for Call 'em All just happened to come about organically with not a whole lot of effort. And then I'll use the one that we did on Monday with my brother's company, where we came up with a vision for the year. It was about a half day. We did it some in the morning, and then we did some more in the afternoon. The entire company, which was maybe 8 or 10 of us, including Hi and I, who aren't really, we're just more advisors. Half a day, and then we assigned 2 people to write the draft version 1 of the vision with the key points and outlines that we put together that half day. Does that help at all?
I have one thing I might add on this. I've been on both sides of the culture equation. I've been brought into it and now leading it. And the most important thing that I do now, and that helped me really embrace the culture and become one of the engaged employees, was just the leaders acting it out and living it in every moment. And that doesn't take much more resources. I mean, it's actually no additional resources, maybe just a moment of consideration before any interaction you have. I work remotely, and before every call I jump on, before every email, I kind of sit there and think, how am I going to make this email to my team reflect the culture and show that I've embraced it? And that's what brought me on and sold me on it. And I think that's a good way to start to bring it down to those people who are kind of okay with it. If you can embrace it all the time and really give it energy and positivity, those people who are just okay with it start to see the benefits of really getting in on it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
Yeah, really good. And everybody else, please jump in. Jim's all apologetic. No, he's getting like 5 gold stars. A plus. So yeah, that's a great point. And we really do try to do that. I think as soon as a leader violates the your culture or what your team has decided you're going to be on their own, you kind of have undermined the foundation of everything. Which goes back to, do you care enough to really do this? Because a lot of times it may be tough, certainly to follow what you've decided you want to do as a team. Let's see. I think, Jim, you asked a really good thing. You said, particularly in the beginning. And that's, I think, a really neat aspect. So we talk about how much work, you may need to do and how this may be challenging and that it never ends. But I think we've seen some really cool things happen over time. One is that because we're so consciously competent on our culture and talking about to our entire team, we have to defend it. How do we defend it? Line one of the defense is our interviewing. We can't let people in here that aren't a fit with our culture and that aren't worthy of working with you guys. And so we involve the entire team with interviews. I know High's team on engineering, they all interview everybody. And on our support team, we don't do that, but we have representatives that are always in there representing their team so that they can get a full thumbs up on people coming in. So I think you defend it there, but our team has really, I've noticed, responded to this concept of defending our culture together now that it is well defined, and calling each other out on it and being willing to stand up and defend it is important. And there's a great concept that someone shared with me once. They said, my team has turned into a wolf pack around our culture. I was like, what are you talking about? And they said, well, if somebody does get in here that's not a good fit, I don't have to do anything. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, the wolf pack will chew them up and spit them out on their own. Like, they will realize that they're not a good fit. And the culture essentially takes care of itself because the wolf pack's going to spit them out. And they're going to self-select out by knowing that they're not a good fit in the culture, which I think is a really, really wonderful benefit of having a healthy culture. And then the other thing is that it seems like some of these projects start taking care of themselves, Jim. So in terms of the hours and the resources, they're able to shift downward. And I'll give you a good example. Our onboarding was one of our entry-level employees. She, I said, hey, listen, guys, we got to figure out how to make all these, this culture, our formula, the manifesto, our vision, part of our onboarding. And she raised her hand and said, can I do it? We can do that. And started soliciting ideas from people and putting together this, what ends up now being a 4-week-long, it seems pretty long. It's a 4-week-long onboarding, and a lot of it is culture. And she put a few ideas out there. She shared it with the team, and more people started throwing ideas in. And that was as simple as her just kind of sharing it, sharing the document out with people, and them getting ideas, crowdsourcing ideas, and her just incorporating them in the document. And so that there's a huge thing we take that's been very successful for us over the past, I'd say, 1.5 or 2 years. And that was an entry-level person who answers phones and chats and emails in the downtime in between putting this together and putting in a few hours afterward, after work to put this project together. But it's a huge source of pride for her. And it took nothing from our leadership team at all.
I think that just like how Open Book teaches everyone how to be entrepreneurs and how to think like an owner and to help make these smaller decisions that make an impact on the bottom line, I think if you involve everybody in shaping the culture, I think people have the same ownership towards it, and they're going to watch it just like and make these small decisions that form the culture, just like how being open about your books help the bottom line.
Did you once again, did you guys do a lot of offsites to begin with by just, okay, let's get out of the work environment and let's just talk about culture? Or was this just more or less it wasn't anything that was, it wasn't throwing the bomb. It was just a little incremental steps one way.
Yep.
Yeah. You know what, Jim? It started when I got the feedback from High and went out to leadership places. I just started reading books and picking up little ideas, and it was all these little things in the beginning. So from that respect, it was High and I going out and just, you go to a tasty catering, or you get on something like a fishbowl like this, and you take a few little ideas there. And then we obviously threw some bombs in there, right? We did a lot of running plays, 3-4 yard running plays. And then every once in a while you throw a bomb and the guy catches it, you got a touchdown. But I think it's a lot of running plays. If we can go to a football analogy there. And it really just started with, interesting. I think we could work that, or we could do that, something like that here. And it's kind of funny when you map out, let's say probably the last 6 years of Call 'em All, the bomb plays, the big touchdown plays I have on my revenue, my annual revenue. I look at revenue monthly, and I put those key points on there, inflection points on there, because I want to see how I don't need a study to know that culture is really helping us win the battle of business. But I like putting those on there and seeing, wow, we did this. And then 2 years later, we had a fantastic growth year. We'd open book management, for example. And 2 years later, we had a killer year. And wow, I can't prove that was because everybody's eyes were open and everybody was aligned towards the same things, and we had a vision that really put us all together. But I don't think it hurt, if that's fair to say. So a lot of them are little. Jim, we do our own version of open book management, and it started literally with our all staff meeting on Wednesdays. We put up an empty Google sheet, and we had like engineering, customer experience, other. What should we be tracking, guys, to know that we're doing this right? All right, here you go. Let's put revenue on there. We should probably track our revenue, right? And that was it. And it started, and people were looking funny. And that's not even that's like a tiny, tiny little, hey guys, what should we be tracking on customer experience? How about we should track how many emails we answered this week? Good idea. Let's put it up there. Do we have that? And somebody would be like, no. Okay, well, who can figure that out for next week? And so that is how our open book management started, was just throwing up a few ideas, and truthfully, it ballooned up. There ended up being like 160 lines on the thing, and then we're like, okay, this is crazy. Some of these are just good to know, and then it shrank down. And so it's like this all these tiny little increments that started with really not much in terms of resources, just, hey, everybody, we'll share whatever we need to share. And I've got a few ideas, but I kind of want you guys to get the ball started. And I just shut up. Just hard for me to do, but shut up. And we kind of figured it out on our own. And here we are. That was maybe 3 years ago. And now I couldn't even imagine our company without our sharing, metrics on our Wednesday lunches. And we don't do it like Zingerman's. We don't do it like Great Game of Business. They do it SRC. If you guys have read the book, Great Game of Business, we do it our own way, but it works for us. And we built it on our own with tiny little, with a blank spreadsheet one day. I hope we're answering your question, Jim, or this is interesting for people out there.
Well, I want to know when I can bring my team down to see you guys.
Anytime. And come on a Wednesday. Do it. Come on a Wednesday and we'll order lunch for you. And you can kind of see, we'll give you a tour and then do that. And people do that all the time. So please do.
Brad, you want to wrap it up? And
yeah, I can wrap it up unless anybody wants to jump in with anything. So we kind of covered 4 things. The first one is, as you embark on trying to change the culture, understand where you are and what you want out of it. And when I say where you are, where's your company, where's your team, where are you personally, and what do you want out of it? The next thing we put is do your homework, and I'd call that like building a support structure and educating yourself and making sure that you are consciously competent as you embark on this. Be aware, or maybe consciously incompetent, but be mindful and put your efforts around educating yourself so that you can lead this really well. And then the big one, involve your team. It's gotta be your team. It can't come from on high. One of my failures I watched a friend go through was, I said, oh, do you have your values? And he said, yeah, the executive team, we did an offsite and we came up with our values. And I was like, wait, and then you just came back and told the entire team what their values were going to be? That's not going to work, man. That doesn't work. So yeah, involve your team. And then the last one is institutionalize it. And that's where you have to live it as the leader. You have to incorporate it into your daily decision-making. Tom Walters, put it on the wall, and make it part of your hiring, onboarding, your reviews, your firing, make it all of that incorporated into what you're doing. And I think, there are some touchdown bomb plays you can do, but so much of this is just little things each day. And hopefully you look down and then you have a big wolf pack out there defending your culture, and you have a lot of people that love what they do. And at the same time as creating a place people love working, your business performance is your profitability is outstanding as well. Fair enough?
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's what we've got, everybody. I hope this was helpful. This is the first time we've done anything like this. So if it stinks, Hi and I particularly like negative feedback. It's something weird about us. We gloss over the nice things and go to the stinky parts. But please let Hamza and Ashton know if this was beneficial or not. And then Jim, come on down. Anybody wants to come on down to Dallas and have lunch with us on a Wednesday or really any other day, we'd love to have you. And we love talking about this. So even if it's just an email or a phone call, Hi and I are here for anybody that wants to jump in and have a conversation.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.